Thank you all for being here today. Tanzi, my dear friends, Igwa Kia, thank you for being here with us on this special day. Honored guests, cherished students, and hardworking staff, I'm thankful to be able to appreciate and acknowledge the land around us in many ways. When I think of Treaty 8 territory, I think of connection. Along with the Douglas Treaties, Treaty 8 was the last treaty signed between the Crown and a First Nation in BC. Up until the modern Nisga'a Final Agreement, which paved the path for other modern treaties acknowledging sovereignty and land rights to First Nations. When I think of Treaty 8 territory, I think of connection. On the western side of the Rocky Mountains, you will find different birds than you will find on the eastern side. Here in Chetwynd, we see both. The Pine Pass connects them. There are nations that have been connected to this land since time immemorial and found refuge here. Blueberry River, Doig River, Fort Nelson, Halfway River, McLeod Lake, Prophet River, and our close neighbors, family, and friends at Soto and West Moberly First Nations. In the north, people work hard and rely on one another. Our hard work on this land connects us all the way to the coast with a pipeline running from Hudson's Hope to Gingoch in the Nisga'a Nation. I am thankful to be here today on this land that connects all of us. Thank you. Thanks again for joining us today. On this special day, we will join together, listen to student voice, and enjoy student art while reflecting on truth and reconciliation. I remember listening to Stephen Harper's apology for a residential school system when I was a young man. I would be forgiven by some for thinking that was the beginning of truth and reconciliation in Canada, but I know better. I like to think of the beginning of truth and reconciliation starting with Shannon Kustasian. I remember reading her story as a younger boy. She was a young girl, just like many of you, but she was born in another place called Attawapiskat. I often share Shannon's story with others. Many in the audience will know it. I know that an important part of many First Nations cultures teach us that stories are a part of who we are and are held for certain families and people to tell only. But I feel comfortable sharing Shannon's story because she wanted all of us to. Shannon wanted her story told loudly and shared with all. Shannon was Muskego and Anu James Bay Cree and grew up in Attawapiskat First Nation in Northern Ontario. Her school had been contaminated by gas spills, so they put up a small mobile classroom and promised a new school for the town at a later time. We know about and recognize the trauma caused by inhumane systems that take away people's rights, identity, and families, and leave legacies of hurt. Shannon had to fight for things that no child should ever have to fight for. A clean building, washrooms in the same building as their school classroom, a gymnasium to play sports, to not see mice in the halls, and to not have ice creeping into their classrooms. Many in her community traveled to faraway areas and stayed with foster families to attend college or have good post-secondary opportunities. Students that were 12 or 13 years old were leaving their families and homes to attend high schools in larger towns far away. Shannon did this. And she also took her story to local politicians, and she got support pushing for a new school and better conditions for her loved ones. When people weren't listening, she went to the capital city of Canada, and she took her story to the Prime Minister of Canada, making speeches on Parliament Hill. Charlie Angus, an MP that supported her, said, "The moment when she stood up on Parliament Hill and called out the government is one of the most historic moments in Canadian history. When the first time an Indigenous youth called out the government, she was only 13, and she was so poised, and it shook everything up. That was in 2008. Shannon's life was later taken in a tragic accident in 2010. Her story, her dream, lived on through her spirit, her family, and her legacy. I look up her community from time to time, and I reflect on how things change. They can change. The new school was built in 2014. I couldn't believe that it took so long. But things can get better. That hope and optimism in education that we all share is the heart of education and learning, and helps the people in our communities all reach their dreams in life. Shannon helped me to understand the importance of culture, language, and learning as an embodiment of the two. For learning is to share. We share our culture, our language, and our stories with one another. And so, all the young people out there, know your culture, your language, your family, whatever those things mean to you now. Learn as much as possible about the land you are on and the people around you. See their stories and build real community with them. Let's acknowledge our ancestors and where we come from. We do walk in their footsteps. So use your heart to learn, listen, and see each other's stories, learn from each other. That is where we learn the most in life. I'm happy to say that as an administrator here at CSS, I notice each and every day that I see families supporting each other, students supporting each other, and the school supporting each other. So before I welcome some of our special guests to speak, I'd just like to acknowledge our Indigenous Education Department that worked hard on this ceremony together in this event. Miss Ashley Norris can't be here today. She's working with the volleyball tournament. Miss Kayla McDonald, if you're around and would like to stand up, or come and stand with me for a moment. We did a lot of work together to put the assembly together. Thanks, Miss McDonald. And today we have a lot of teachers and classes that worked hard on this with us. Miss Bree Karan did a lot of work. Miss Katie Clark's class did a lot of work for this. Mr. Umay Evans' class did a lot of work for this day as well. And in fact, all of the teachers across the school did a lot of small projects that became a part of this today. So I am thankful for all of their work. And sorry, one second. Now, I would like to welcome our honored guests from the Soto First Nations Council. First, I'd like to welcome Councillor Eurita Owens.
Gotta put my glasses on. Getting older. Didn't think I'd ever need glasses, but now I do. Anyway, I'm just gonna lift this up. Tanse, Kakio, Nia Eurita Nitsikasun. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eurita Owens. As an Indigenous person, I work as an elected official for Soto First Nations in Moberly Lake. My title is counselor. I went to this very high school and graduated in 1999. And yeah, right on, high school. But something I remember about this school was way back then, I didn't get the opportunity to learn the true history of First Nations people. Missing and murdered Indigenous women, Every Child Matters, the treaties, that wasn't taught. So this is a great opportunity to be here today to share perspectives on what truth and reconciliation really is. I'm happy that this very school I went to all those years ago has now opened those doors to educate why First Nations history is important for everyone to learn and acknowledge. So thank you, all the organizers of this high school. You're doing great. So the reason we are all gathered here today is so that we as a collective could remember the lives lost of the First Nations children who were forcefully taken from their homes, away from their families, and put into the residential school system. The mistreatment, improper care, and abuse is the sad truth in our Canadian history. The first residential school in Canada began its operation in the early 18th century, and the last school closed in 1996. That's not that long ago. In the beginning, when government officials were planning on how to take control, they included the military to enforce their plan. They used the Catholic religion as a tool to make it sound like they were helping the First Nations get civilized. But that was all deception. It was a lie. Because it changed the way of life for an entire race of people who were already living their best life in abundance and in peace. Fear, force, and weapons began to threaten the lives of families across the country. From east to west, it created a wave of chaos, depression, rage, war, and death. The First Nations people did not have the military on their side. They had no weapons that could fight against the power of their guns. They had no voice to stand up to get justice because there were no supports in place for them. If they did not listen and comply with the laws of the government, they would be killed or thrown in jail and beaten and starved. It was harsh back then. So I don't see this day as a celebration, but a remembrance to the lives lost to discrimination and violence. But it is an opportunity for all of us to reflect and think about how we need to conduct ourselves, our behaviors, and how we treat people. Kindness and respect are what we need to create a friendly, safe environment for everyone to coexist together in harmony. It seems easy, this simple idea, but it is the most difficult thing to achieve. Our world has lost the value of what respect truly means. There is too much information out there that promotes individuals to get distracted from what is right, what is wrong. The facts are that anyone at any time can go on their phones or tablets or computers and easily access information that can either feed your mind for the good or it can feed your mind for the bad. It really comes down to a choice. How do you want to contribute to our society? The people in the past made a choice to use power and authority to control and dominate and murder. They destroyed lives. They broke families apart. And why? Why did they do all of that? For the love of money? For the power to control? To have authority? The problem was that they didn't want to understand the First Nations way of life, their customs, traditions, languages. They didn't want to accept their differences. Being different is a beautiful thing. It's what makes you unique. Being different is what gives you the ability to share with others a whole new perspective. So don't let racism blind you from the beauty of someone else's differences. Back in the 17th century, First Nations people lived freely off the land. They had nobody telling them how to live, what to eat, and what area of land they had to live on. When colonization started to cross this country, lives were changed forever. The government created laws like the Royal Proclamation and then the Indian Act. These were laws that didn't support First Nations people. It was discriminatory against them. They didn't have rights. They didn't have the law on their side. They weren't allowed to vote. They weren't allowed to own land. They were not allowed to do many things, even hunt to feed themselves. They were outcasted all because they were different. They had brown skin instead of white skin. They had long black hair instead of blonde or red hair. They had clothes made of animal hides instead of cloth. They lived in teepees instead of houses. They were labeled wild, savages. But to First Nations people, it was all they knew. It was their way of life. This wrongdoing had negative impacts for generations, and we still deal with those negative impacts with our people today. The hurt and pain is why people go into addictions, into the jail systems, and on the streets being homeless. If you have ever had something bad happen to you, then you can understand hurt and pain and how that can sink deep into your soul and change you as a person. That bad experience impacted the way you live your life. It can be damaging to your mental health and well-being. I'm sharing this kind of perspective to paint a picture for you to realize how it really was for First Nations people in this country generations ago. You may have heard something called generational trauma. All those years ago, hundreds and hundreds of innocent children were taken away, just like that, gone. Most of them died. Most of them never went back home. Most of them lost their way. Many didn't even know where home was, what a healthy family felt like, what love felt like. There was no love taught in those residential schools. Many children died from malnutrition, sickness, and heartbreak. For those who made it home, they had years of trauma and torment and abuse to deal with. That led into years of addiction, and the cycle carried on and on in their family lines. So just imagine if you were not allowed to talk your own language, and if you did not apply to the rules, you were beaten, tortured, abused. Only recently, people have started to talk about the disgusts of what took place in those residential schools. The years of trauma, addiction, and fear can really break a person apart. But it takes courage and bravery to share those deep, dark secrets of what really happened so the healing journey can begin and the cycles of abuse can stop. This is the brutal history that we have. And this is why it's important for educators to talk about it. So just ask yourself, do you think that was okay? Do you think that it was right for an Indian agent who worked for the government to just take children away from their families, starting at the young age of 3? Do you think the laws were made equally? Was it fair to use military force against a people that didn't have guns for weapons, but only bows and arrows for hunting? Was it okay for priests and nuns to abuse children? When you really think about it, the answer is no. Of course not. The laws back then were made by men who wanted to dominate, to have all the power and authority to control. They wanted to assimilate the First Nations people, and that's why our Canadian history is so brutal. And that's why it makes people feel uncomfortable, because it is the sad truth. It really happened. But it's important and it's essential to teach, to understand why the First Nations people have such a tragic story and how they suffered such an enormous devastation. The greed that some people had was all about how they could take advantage of the land's resources, how they could extract gold or oil and gas for profit. The original intent of the treaty signing was to share the land together, but that's not how it was done. It impacted the way of life for First Nations people across this country. It led to war, famine, sickness, disease, and death. There was no peaceful process. So when we remember the past, we must think about how we all today can do better. be better. So how will you make changes for the issues that we all face today? How do we change racism? It's not about pointing the finger, blaming. It's about learning from the mistakes and the choices certain individuals made in the past so we, the current people of today, can be better than them. We have the power to be the change, to say no to racism, to educate ourselves and make smarter choices so we don't repeat the mistakes that were made in history. I really thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen. It's important. And I just want to say merci, because now you understand a little bit more about what this day means to First Nations people. By participating, you are now part of that change. It's important that you showed up today because it shows that all of you care. So thank you for caring. Thank you for respecting our truth about our history in this country we all call home. It's an honor to be here, and I thank you again. Merci.
Thank you very much, Councillor Owens, for your beautiful words there. Now, if I could welcome Councillor Colleen Tutasak to come and speak for us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Arita, for that. That was really emotional for me. First of all, I want to say good afternoon. My name is Colleen Totasak. I'm an elected official at Soto First Nations. My job is to govern our nation alongside the chief and my other 3 council members. Kind of like the mayor and the council of Chetwynd, that's what we do. We deal with ongoing issues, probably a lot of it related to intergenerational impacts. So it is a full duty position. I would also like to thank the Chetwynd Secondary School District 59 for inviting me here to speak to you about truth and reconciliation. So first of all, I just wanted to define truth. And you look in the dictionary, it says the quality or state of being true. That which is a fact or a reality. And then you want to define reconciliation. And reconciliation, it states the restoration of friendly relations. And that's why we have Truth and Reconciliation Day. Truth and Reconciliation was recognized June 1st, 2008. It was an agreement to inform Canadians about the residential school systems and the abuse that the children endured at the school. The day honors the children who never returned home and survivors of residential schools as well as their families and communities. Public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component of the reconciliation process. So First Nations, Inuit, and Métis were taken out of their homes, families and communities, out of their homes and from their families and communities to attend these residential schools. And they were taken far away, as Arita had mentioned. Some of this stuff has overlapped with what Arita's great speech in regards to truth and reconciliation. The first church-run Indian school was opened in 1831. And the last residential school to operate was the Christie Indian Residential School located in British Columbia. It had closed in 1996, 28 years ago. Arita's speech got me very emotional. My mom, she was in Edmonton Hospital, and upon her release, the Indian agent stole her from the hospital and took her to Sturgeon Lake Residential School, known as the Missionary. And it really hit home. My mom had been through a lot, and there were a lot of intergenerational impacts that we were affected by. And I won't speak about it. Arita spoke on it. But it still goes on today, the trauma and all the issues that we go through. So today, coming together to recognize it, to acknowledge what we have gone through, what have all the families have gone through, all the missing children. I just want to thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those heartfelt words, Miss Colleen Todosak, Councillor Colleen. Now, if I could welcome Councillor Donovan Campbell to speak with us. Thank you.
It's, days like these can be tough sometimes when you hear a lot of challenging truths. But sometimes I get kind of nervous in front of crowds, and it can be for different reasons. But it's okay to be nervous sometimes, because I think you kids have one of the most difficult and challenging jobs that a lot of people don't have. And that's to look at truth and to process that. And it's like you take on the job of warriors in training, because warriors in our society, they're there to keep peace and they're there to keep harmony. But to do that, they have to learn how to work themselves inside. And they do that by looking at truth, very challenging things, what they see, what they hear. And that comes inside to their heart, their mind, body, and spirit. And they shape themselves first. They fight with themselves and they bring out the goodness. So kids, when you work on things that are orange, like bringing up exhibits and looking at the truth, that's very hard. And you're very powerful people for doing that. And it's a big responsibility that you carry, because it lets people do such amazing things. I have a daughter, she's 4 years old. And one of the things she introduced me to was traditional dancing. It's something that she likes, and I've had to shape my life around that. I didn't grow up with those kinds of things. I heard about them. But she got shown this at such a young age that it's normal for her. All she knows is jingle dancing and shawls and fancy dancing. And I actually confused her the other weekend because I told her we were going to go dancing. And she thought jingles. And I tried to explain, no, it's not jingles. We show up to this dance and a bunch of little girls running around with tiaras and different types of dresses. And she'd never seen this. She was upset that this wasn't the type of dance that she was used to. But that was amazing because it showed what was normal for her and what she got to grow up with. And I'm so proud of that, because when she gets to dance and everyone celebrates that with her, that's an amazing piece of reconciliation. So I just want to say, you're all very strong people, and thank you for what you do, and just understand that it's very important. And it's such something that it's not forgotten, because it sets Canada and all of us on such a great path together as we learn to talk about things and learn from each other. So thank you.
Thank you very much for those meaningful words, Councillor Donovan Campbell. And now, I would like to introduce Wayne LaRiviere. Wayne is a community artist from Dawson Creek. He has lent his heart to our school for many years and highly values our students and community. He inspires passion for art and for community in our students. And he has given a lot of color to our halls. If Wayne LaRiviere would like to come and join me, appreciate it. And if you would like to speak, it would be an honor.
I couldn't have done this project alone. 4 days ago, I arrived at your school, a guest. Today, I leave your school, a friend. Thank you, Mr. David. I would like to invite the students who worked on this project with me to come up so I could publicly acknowledge you. Thank you.
If any of the students that worked on the mural with us could come and stand with us, we'd be very thankful. Oh, guys. A few of us wrote a small reflection on working on the mural. Some of them aren't here right now because they're playing volleyball. But they wanted us to share their words with you. So I will read this for Ocean Nadu right now. I enjoyed that I got to work with my friends and I got to help people. I enjoyed working with Wayne. It is important to do things with others because it helps us build strong bonds with people. It builds community. It is important to work with and learn from elders because they can teach us things that we don't know. And for Camden Garbett, I will read this. I enjoyed working on the mural because it was pretty fun, cutting leaves and stuff. I think community art is cool. I think it is important to learn from our elders so that we can learn skills to use when we are older. You want to read? Okay. And I'll now read this for Bree Scott. I enjoyed working on the mural because it was really fun. It was relaxing too. I enjoy doing community art. I think it is important to get the community together and make something beautiful together. It is important to work with and learn from elders because they have different stories and more knowledge to share. And Ava Weiss. I enjoyed working on the mural because there was a story told behind it. Community art is important because it involves everyone, and everyone has different ways of doing the same thing. And you can see it when it's all put together in the community. We learn from each other. Our elders tell stories about the past, so you are able to learn from the past and do things differently in a better way. And for Colin Obsassin. I enjoyed working on the mural because it was helping for Orange Shirt Day, and I like Wayne. Me and Uriah have worked with Wayne a couple of times. The community art project helped us remember what Orange Shirt Day is about and to reflect. It is important to work with and learn from elders. Elders teach us a lot about everything and help us remember what happened in the past. And for Uriah Collins, I enjoyed working on the mural because it was peaceful. I enjoyed helping out. I enjoyed working with Wayne. It was relaxing. I think that community projects are important because they help out the people. It is important to learn from our elders. You get wisdom from them. Thank you so much for all the work that you guys did, and thank you for the beautiful mural. And lots of people in the school helped, so you'll all see yourselves in the mural in some ways. Thank you. We'll just wait a quick moment while one of the schools exits. Thanks for being here today. We are continuing. We will quickly share some reflections on school that students wrote. I'm just going to read a few quickly. We handed these out to a lot of grade 8 and 9 classes and some grade 12 classes as well to get a bit of a mix. And we asked them, how do you think school should feel for every child, every student? They should be happy and glad. They should feel the same for every student and help them equally. Every child deserves to feel safe and happy at school. No one should be afraid to go to school. Equal and nice and not hard math. Safe, not in danger, unpressured by other students, not ignored. Students should also be free to express oneself without being shamed, judged, or shoved aside. Safe, happy, loved, appreciated, comfortable. Equal and nice for every student. It should feel safe and respected. Students should be able to be themselves and express how they feel. Just some short reflections. We're going to quickly share a few poems. If I could invite Mara Mamek to come and stand with me. For that every child matters and deserves to grow old. Schools should be places where every child is safe, where they feel they belong, not judged just on their race. We wear our orange shirts on this day of all days to grieve for the children buried in thousands of graves. Let us not forget the past wrongs that were done and hold on to that knowledge and move forward with love. Thank you. Thank you, Wesley, and thank you, Josie and Liberty. I also just have a short reflection on a poster and this reflection was done by Sierra Roberts. I'll just read that quickly. I drew an orange shirt on my poster. I know it's boring, but it reminds me of the orange shirt and the little girl. It's not boring. I love how the grandmother gave her the orange shirt as a symbol of love and hope. It was sad when the nuns took that symbol of love and hope away from the girl. And so whenever I wear an orange shirt, I think of her and all of the kids that were made to go to the residential schools. What the orange shirt means to me is that it is a symbol of peace, hope, love, and the shirts mean that residential schools will no longer be around us to make us feel bad about who we are, who you are. That's what orange shirts mean to me. Thank you so much for writing that, Sierra Roberts. And now I'm honored to welcome to speak with us West Moberly First Nations Elder Dean Doki.
What did I do with my book? Is there a book here somewhere? Where? Oh, wrong place. That's how old I am. It's my time.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. Can I take this off?
Yeah.
I'm too far away from the people. I don't like being that far away. My name is Dean Doki. I'm from West Moberly First Nation. I am a descendant of Old Doki. Same with Aretha, my cousin. Actually, I have a lot of cousins over there. Where's my cousins on this side, right? And my traditional name is Uskais, and my spiritual name, given to me by the Nakota Sioux, who adopted me as part of their nation, is Ambwitha Gawani, which means soaring golden eagle. There's a hum in this thing. I'm here to talk about two things briefly. I won't take too much of your time. I did a presentation with the students in Don Titus, and I'll probably take the same approach with this one. On residential school effect, the generational effect is something that I want to touch on, and a brief history of West Moberly. Residential school is actually a very much a generational thing that happens, and it comes in a time where impacted and conditioning of the way that people were treated and not seen as human beings in a lot of ways. My grandmother was in a convent for most of her life. I think Mary Cucci, who was a member of the Solar Nation. My mother is Cree. My father is Danazaa. So we call ourselves Danazaa in West Moberly. Danazaa means the people here. And reminds me, I graduated here in 1971. I know, I'm old. I'm very old. I'm as old as some of the trees out there, but as a tree, at 73, they're still pretty young, right? So I see myself as a tree. So the residential school effect is a horrendous thing in my life, and certainly has affected my life in a way that it put me back some years, and I'll tell you how. When I was growing up your age, and maybe younger, say grade 1, I went to school, Moberly School. I couldn't speak a word of English. I could sing it and I could print it, but I could not speak it. We transferred to this school. My mother wanted us to graduate and have some education. My father said, no, you want to be a trapper or make sure they trap and hunt. And I'm glad that we took the took the higher road. And what happened was that, so I came here not knowing English for 2 years. So I was failed for 2 years because I couldn't communicate with anyone. And so I was 2 years behind. I didn't graduate till I was almost 20 years old, while everybody else was 17. And some of the things, I was always afraid of authority, which is one of the things that the residential school always gave. So because my grandmother was in residential school, as well as we were, don't talk when there's English people around. The other was that being scared of authority. It didn't matter what authority. What they call the game warden or conservation officer, there was a fear. Any authority was a fear to our people because of the treatment. And we experienced that in generational. Even though I wasn't in residential school, that was the conditioning given to the parents and so on. And so there was always that, I can't say non-confident, but you didn't have the confidence enough to do that because there's always a blockage of that conditioning. The other thing was that it was hard to communicate with people because you saw yourself different. You didn't see yourself as equal because that was the treatment that was given. Until I joined a rock and roll band in grade 8, then I became an equal. I don't know how that happened. It was an incredible miracle that happened in my life because I could play in a band and finally I was accepted. But I also grew up in a hippie generation, which was a counter and helped a lot of our people in that sense. Because as the hippie generation was, even though it was a drug culture as it was, they started protesting and started identifying where the issues were. And in that place, the nation started to rise and said, yeah, we need to do something different. Oka was the very first thing that happened in 1991, if you ever taught that. Oka was actually a time where the nations of Canada finally stood up and said, no, you won't do this anymore, government or any authority. What had happened in Oka was in Montreal and Mohawk territory was that in 1990, I was actually in university, my third year at that time. My professor who works with me today, who I hired today, he's 40 years in the University of Fraser Valley, said, I can't teach you guys anymore. I have to have the perspective of the nations. You have to write your own stories. You have to tell me what it is. So he took all the students of that time and we gathered all the information from. But Oka was about a development company that was going to desecrate the graves of the Mohawk, a traditional grave site. They're going to wipe it out, and they decided, and the nation, the Mohawk said, no, you're not going to do that. The government called in the army and the police, and the people went and laid in front of the tracks of the tanks that were coming in. That's how they stopped them. They were willing to give their lives for that. That gave a rise to all Canada. And other nations also stopped a lot of the things that happened. Lillooet, for example, who I worked with at that point in time when I was still in university, they shut off the transportation routes and the communication routes because, get this, every transportation and communication route goes through First Nations land. Everyone. And that's when Canada said, whoa, we can't do this anymore. That's why the residential schools slowly disappeared. That was the effect. And no one knows that, but I was there. I was one of the administrators that helped build West Moberly, and I'll give you that story. But the residential effect, I mean, generation residential effect still exists in government because as a result, we think the reserve was a concentration camp, a form of a concentration camp, like World War II, right? With the Jews and so on. You can't just go do whatever you want. You had to get permission to leave. And that's what happened with Soto and Manitoba. That's why they left the reserve there and came here. But the story goes that the prophets of the Danazan knew that they were coming. And they already knew what they had to do. Because twin sisters is a common prophecy for both Soto and Danazan. We have that bond. So in the educational system, I'm so glad to say, because in the last year and a half now, I've been talking in both the schools and the colleges, and that people are knowing the truth. If there's no truth, there's no reconciliation. And I heard that from your previous chief, Ken Cameron. I've heard it from Peter Havlik. I've heard it from even government officials. We need truth. The people that experienced it, the people that were there, they're the ones who are still living, the survivors, know the truth. And you know the truth. And it's now your responsibility as young people to give that truth. I heard an incredible story in Tumbler Ridge last year. I did a presentation there. And before I did the presentation, I guess they were talking about the TLE settlement, about how, and there was some older people that were talking about it. And this one student from the school in Tumbler Ridge, grade 11 and 12, she heard this conversation. They were saying, oh, those, people, they get everything. They get it for free. They get that for free. Well, that was a debt that was owed by the government for over 100 years. But the student knew, and she was grade 11, and she went up to them and said, no, that's not the truth. Here's the truth. And there's nothing they can say. And she was not First Nation. And I say, yes, yay. You have that responsibility, truth. Because there is no reconciliation unless there's truth. And you know the truth. Government will not deal with the truth. They can't. Because there's so much has happened over the years. It's the educational system, us as individuals, us as First Nations, and whatever culture that you're in, whoever you are, we have that responsibility because we all share the land. We are all equal. The other part is that, there's a lot more things that can be had, and I'm very willing. I look after the historical record for Westmore because I'm old. I'm old as a tree, right? And it's my duty to collect all the information from the West Mowbray perspective, all the historical documents, even the stories we have to give to you, to share with you. And that's why all this is being recorded now. But at the same time, you know, I'm very honored to be here with you, and I'm very honored to be able to hear students that stand up to the truth and be that person, because their life will be so much better. Truth is a free place to be. Okay, I want to thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate it. But just a brief history of West Mowbray. West Mowbray, actually, our great grandfather was actually the the founder of West Mowbray, I guess you can say. He was a dreamer, from what I gather. And he was the one that populated it. He ended up getting a wife from Cloud Lake, and here we are. And that's the whole thing about life, isn't it? Without our parents, we don't exist. Without our grandparents, we don't exist. Without our, you know, it's the chain of life, the cycle of life. Honor your forefathers, honor your grandparents, honor your friends. It doesn't matter who they are, and your parents. Because without them, we do not exist. We cannot. There's only one of you, whether it be in the past or in the future. There's only, you are the only person that will be you. That's how unique you are. There will never be and never was a person like you. Think about it. That's how the Creator works. There's no one that'll be like you. You are the only one for eternity, and cherish that. Now, West Mowbray, when my grandfather started that whole thing, I remember him. He gave me a bird. Well, and here's life. Why did he give me a bird? He didn't give me everybody else a bird, but he saw something in me, obviously. And I got mad at this bird. I was probably about 4 years old. And he kept flying away. I said, "Here," I put it on the ground, I smothered it, and I killed it. That changed my life completely. I saved every bug after that, because you know what? I had to walk up the hill with my dad and go tell my grandfather that, you know, I destroyed this bird. It was his bird. He gave to me. A hard lesson. And that's why I became a leader. I followed my father after that. My father, after my grandfather died, would have been what? I guess the 50s sometime? Mid 50s? You read that? She's not listening to me. um, yeah, probably about the mid 50s that he passed away. And then we moved to Chetwynd. That's where I had my training. The elementary schools where I went to school, and then here. Very fond years, a lot of friends that I had. But then my father took over, and he decided that he would separate from Halfway. So Halfway and West Mowbray were one nation called the Hudson Hope Band, and then that's how we became West Mowbray. And it was the only time that they would let bands separate. And then after that, we worked on it. And Indian Affairs was like a residential school effect, because they didn't let you do anything. You had to ask for money, you had to beg for money, and we really didn't have anything to start with. But ultimately, we got into business, and we grew from there. And all the ages, and certainly we can't take all the credit for it. All the people that worked to be free in the nations, that's how it took. Oka was the start of that whole thing. And there's actually a documentary that we're doing for West Mowbray, which will be on site. We'll give that to you. It's called West Mowbray Storyscapes. It's going to be an educational part of that we're building right now. I don't want to take too much of your time. You've been here all afternoon. I really appreciate your attention. And any educator, you can call me anytime to come in and do specific classes if you want. That's not an issue. Our time is there for you. I appreciate you. Anyone? You're young. That's so awesome.